How you doing, folks? Still with me? Well, okay, we'll get started to this financing, the financing section. Line 54, section 2A here, section 2 of the financing. And 2A, line 54, pre-qualification. A completed AAR, pre-qualification form. And you got boxes that is going to tell you whether it is or is not attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. Line 55, loan contingency. Buyer's obligation to complete this sale is contingent upon buyer obtaining loan approval for the loan described in the AAR Loan Status Update, LSU, form without prior to document PTD, prior to document, conditions no later than 3 days prior to the close of escrow date. If buyer is unable to obtain loan approval without PTD, that's prior to document, conditions, a buyer shall deliver a notice of the inability to obtain loan approval without PTD, prior to document condition, to seller or escrow company no later than 3 days prior to the close of escrow date. Line 59, 2C, unfulfilled loan contingency. This contract shall be canceled and buyer shall be entitled to a return of the earnest money if after diligent and good faith effort buyer is unable to obtain loan approval without PTD conditions no later than 3 days prior to the close of escrow date. Buyer acknowledges that prepaid items paid separately from the earnest money are not refundable. 2D, 62, line 62, interest rate necessary funds. Buyer agrees that the inability to obtain loan approval due to the failure to lock the interest rate and points by separate written agreement with the lender during the inspection period, or the failure to have the down payment or other funds due from buyer necessary to obtain the loan approval without conditions and close this transaction is not an unfulfilled loan contingency. 2E, line 66, loan status update. Buyer shall deliver to seller the LSU with at a minimum lines 1 through 40 completed describing the current status of the buyer's proposed loan within 5 days after contract acceptance, and instruct lender to provide an updated LSU to broker and seller upon request. Line 69, loan application. Unless previously completed during the inspection period, buyer shall complete, sign, and deliver to the lender a loan application and grant lender permission to access buyer's trimeraged residential credit report, credit report, and provide to lender all initial requested signed disclosures and initial requested documentation listed in the LSU. on lines 32 and 35. Loan processing during escrow. Buyer agrees to diligently work to obtain the loan and will properly provide the lender with all additional documentation required. Buyer shall sign all loan documents no later than 3 days prior to the close of escrow date. Type of financing. And it has conventional in a checkbox, FHA checkbox, VA checkbox, USDA checkbox, assumption checkbox, seller carryback checkbox, checkbox for whatever other type of financing. Loan costs. All costs of obtaining the loan shall be paid by the buyer unless otherwise provided for herein. Seller concession, if any, in addition to the other costs, seller has agreed to pay herein. Seller agrees to pay up to whatever percent of the purchase price or dollar amount for buyer's loan costs, including prepaids, impounds, and buyer's title escrow closing costs. VA loan costs. In the event of a VA loan, seller agrees to pay the escrow fee and up to dollar amount of loan costs. Not up to loan costs not permitted to be paid by the buyer. In addition to the other costs, seller has agreed to pay herein, including seller's concessions. Line 81. Changes. Buyer shall immediately notify seller of any changes in the loan program, financing terms, or lender described in the pre-qualification form if attached hereto, or LSU provided within 5 days after contract acceptance, and shall only make any such changes without the prior written consent of seller if such changes do not adversely affect buyer's ability to obtain loan approval without PTD conditions, increase seller's closing costs, or delay close of escrow. Line 85. Appraisal contingency. Buyer's obligation to complete this sale is contingent upon an appraisal of the premises acceptable to lender for at least the purchase price. If the premises fail to appraise for the purchase price in any appraisal required by lender, buyer has 5 days after notice of the appraised value to cancel this sale and receive a refund of the earnest money, or the appraisal contingency shall be waived. Line 89. Appraisal fees. Appraisal fees, when required by lender, shall be paid by, could be the buyer, seller, other. Check the box. Appraisal fees, check the box are, check the box are not, whichever one you choose, included in seller's concessions if applicable. We're going to go through we're going to be on page 3, that's into page 2, and we're going to do that on a different video. And so hang in there and stick with me, folks, and we'll get through this together. Thank you.